Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here and joining us for this webinar discussing the different options for higher education with young organists. My name is Emily Amos. I am the counselor for Young Organists, and I am joined today by two members of my committee, and I am so excited to get into this.
Hi, everybody. My name is Michelle Kardos. I am also going to be the newly elected counselor for membership. Really excited to be with you all here today.
And my name is Laura Bottei. And yeah, we're excited to talk with you all about some options. If you guys want, I can start with kind of my academic journey, just a little overview. I didn't really start organ until college. So the school that I chose for my undergrad degree was not really I didn't make the choice based on organ. So I went to Loyola University Chicago, which is just, a broad spectrum university with they had a fairly small music department. And so I ended up with a Bachelor of Arts in Music from them. And also I did a double major in psychology. So we can also talk about kind of outside interests as well. And then from there, I moved on to do my master's at Indiana University Jacobs School of Music. So sort of the conservatory university kind of hybrid there.
Yeah. So similarly, I did not originally go to my undergrad for organ. I had kind of studied organ and was excited to be at a place that offered organ, but I was actually piano in my undergrad because I got a bachelor's of music degree in music therapy. But at the time, through the organ program, there was also a sacred music certificate, which is what I did, which really got me interested in organ. And I was at a small liberal arts Catholic university for my undergrad. And while I was there, I also took classes at the local community college, which saved me a ton of money, helped me finish within the 4 years with both those degrees and a psych minor. And then from there, and through all of these, I've worked either part or full time throughout my whole career, which I could talk a little about that as well. And then I went on to get my master's in sacred music at Duquesne University. I actually went there as a part-time student. It took me about 2.5 years to do that degree. And then I actually went back and I did a pastoral ministry certificate as another certification program through the undergrad, just to give me a little bit more background with all the churches that I was working with. And finally, I decided that it was time to make the jump. I really wanted to commit to the organ world. And so I went recently, I just graduated with my doctorate in musical arts from the University of Southern California, which was a really, really cool experience, working in many fields of music therapy and grant writing and education and teaching and just a lot of different things that this involved. But it was really fun. And yeah, that's kind of my little journey in a nutshell.
So I started organ fairly young comparatively. And so I kind of knew from a fairly young age that this was what I really wanted to do. And so I thought the conservatory model would work better for me. And so in undergrad, I decided to go and attend the Curtis Institute of Music, which is an incredibly small school in Philadelphia. It does not number more than 150 people, and that includes faculty and staff as well as students. And it was a really intense model, really focused in on music. There wasn't as much of sort of you could there was a program that you could partner with University of Pennsylvania to take certain classes, but there really wasn't much outside of okay, music, music, music. And that was really a great model for me because that's really what I wanted to do. And like Michelle, I also spent time in my undergrad, pretty much every year of my undergrad, working part-time as an organ scholar at different churches in Philadelphia. And so now, currently, I am getting my master's degree at the Shepherd School of Music at Rice, which is basically a conservatory within a university, I would say, similar to Laura's experience at IU. And that's been actually a bit of an interesting adjustment as well, to get used to a slightly larger or significantly larger institution as well. So that's sort of been how my journey has gone so far.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I was going to say, I just put in the chat, feel free to ask questions throughout all of this. If you have any curiosities about maybe some of the things we're talking about or an area you'd like us to focus on more, we're happy to do so.
Yeah. So what would you say was your biggest factor in choosing a certain school or choosing a certain model?
I think for me, because at least for myself, I was a big proponent of working throughout my degrees because I really wanted to use what I was learning as I was doing it. So and when I was choosing schools, I was definitely keeping that in mind in terms of like locations of these schools. Because depending on where you're at, you know, church jobs will pay this or that, or other jobs will pay this or that. So I really had to think about where I was going to be able to not only go to school, but also be afford to live. And what was going to like help me pay those bills throughout that. So that definitely played a huge role in choosing my degree programs. Also, the scholarships and discounts for like working. Like I know for my master's, I got half off tuition because I worked through the diocese, and I also got a certain amount put back to me from the organization that I was working through. They also paid for some continuing ed. So those also helped inform some of my decisions because anything that's going to help you kind of pay back less, if you do have to take out loans, is going to be your best options. And then I think finally, I also, for myself, I really had to think about where I was going to go that also had a program that I was kind of going to be interested in. Even though I'm within organ and sacred music, my area is really focused around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I had to look for music programs that also had other areas that we talked about, like psychology or music therapy or other programs going on where I could also explore these ideas in conjunction with what I was doing in terms of my organ performance skills and improvisation and all of those skills we get as organists.
Cool.
Yeah, in terms of me and my journey to choosing an undergraduate university, like I said, I didn't even really play organ outside of a little bit of dabbling before I went to college. But I honestly think my journey probably would have been basically the same even if I had a little bit more organ experience, because I went into college wanting to double major in music and something else kind of changed. But I had a lot of interests and I wanted to be able to kind of pursue multiple things at once. And so I ended up at a university with like I said, a smaller but like flexible music program and willing to work with me, and kind of just that whole interdisciplinary thing. So a university with a music department rather than a full-on, music school within a university ended up being a really good option for me. And the fact that I was able to get a Bachelor of Arts with a music major as opposed to a Bachelor of Music meant that I was able to do two majors within 4 years. Whereas I know a lot of schools and a lot of conservatories with their like partner universities have the double degree option where you can get a Bachelor of Music and then a Bachelor of Arts or Science or Engineering or whatever other field you're in. But those almost always take 5 years, maybe with summers, just because of the sheer amount of coursework. So I was able to kind of figure out exactly where I wanted to hone in. And eventually I did, find my way into an organ career, which did lead me to graduate school. And ultimately for graduate school, I think for me, it kind of came down to the fit with like the professor with whom I would be studying, but also money and scholarships. Kind of like Michelle said, it's, higher education is very expensive, and that's a really huge consideration for, I think, the vast majority of people going into it. And although, we can make pretty decent money as church musicians, it's not like we're gonna be making multi six figures like a doctor. So that's definitely something really important to consider, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd say for me, the teacher was honestly one of the most important things. So when I was thinking about undergrad, I'd been fortunate enough to go to summer intensives and work with all of these professors. So I had a sense of their personalities and how I worked with them, and I got along well with all of them. And so I sat down and kind of made lists of what I really thought was a really good strength in a certain school, or what I would think, oh, if I went here, what would my gaps be? And what would I have to be thinking about? And so I kind of narrowed it down from there and thought, okay, what does this environment have to offer me? What, what could I work on with this teacher? What are my strengths and weaknesses as a performer and as a musician? And so when it came to choosing, one of the things I thought of was that I wanted to work on my technique a lot. And when I'd worked with Professor Morrison, he had focused a lot on relieving tension in my wrists and in my arms. And he'd been really effective in that. And I also really just liked his demeanor and how he worked with his students and how he supports his students even after they graduate. I think that's also very important. And so I thought, this is a really great relationship. I can work with him. And that was one of the reasons. And then also money as well. Kardos is a full tuition scholarship school. And so that was also it was an easier way to kind of make that decision as well. I did receive full scholarships from other schools. So I had to think about, okay, with money off the table, but that certainly made a difference as well, I would say.
Cool. And we got a question here, which I'm just going to read, which I think is a really good question. How does a student make the choice of which instrument to focus on? Can a college student ever major/minor in multiple instruments? This person writes that her daughter Mary has studied piano for 11 years, violin for 10, and organ for 1, and she loves them all.
Oh, wow.
What a good question. That is such a good question.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, I do know a couple people that I met in grad school these were undergraduate students, but they were doing multiple performance majors in different instruments, or sometimes there was like composition and then an instrument. But again, those do have more requirements. If they're both Bachelor of Music, you could probably obviously this depends hugely on the school and its requirements and what the instruments are, but those would be probably more likely to get done in 4 years than music plus a completely different degree. But yeah, I mean, I would, depending on this musician's level, I mean, I would say that kind of a more comprehensive university might be the right place to start, just because I mean, I did take organ and piano concurrently for several semesters of my undergrad. Um, and if you have multiple interests, it can be a little bit easier to do that outside of a conservatory environment. And then maybe you decide which one you want to specialize in and later go get a master's degree or some sort of artist or performer diploma in that one.
I was going to say, I can add to that as well, because I actually came in as a multi-instrumentalist in my undergrad. I started as piano, and I would also recommend not the conservatory route for that type of thing, if that is an interest of yours. Because what I did is I actually took secondary organ lessons. So my degree, my major focus was on piano. I took organ lessons, which kind of developed into another major, as we can all tell. But with all of that, I also came in because I played the horn and F. I also had to learn guitar and voice for music therapy. So while I was there, I also did voice lessons. I also did guitar lessons. I was in guitar ensemble. I was in the marching band. I was in the jazz ensemble. So that's why I say, like, if that is an interest of you and you're like, even though I kind of want to pursue one or maybe even two, but I also still really want to keep up my other skills that I'm playing, then definitely looking at a university that has multiple different types of programs and ensembles and teachers is going to be the way for you to do that. And I'm not saying you'll be able to I wasn't able to study every instrument every semester, but I was able to keep up my skills enough to learn a variety of things. And then eventually I made the choice that I wanted to go get my master's specifically focusing on organ. But I still use all of those other skills today. Including all my guitar. The voice stuff has come in really, really handy with choir, because now I know how the voice works because I know how my voice works. And I get to learn from other people and experience other, studios and groups and people that were studying it like really intensely, which was really cool to see from the outside how other people pursue their instruments. So my recommendation would definitely be keep that in mind when you're applying into a place, but there's definitely lots of options of what that can look like.
Yeah. And I can say, I definitely agree the conservatory may not be the best environment for this, but I can add a little bit of perspective. as well. We had in my time at Kardos, there was one guy who double majored in violin and piano. And in the case of Kardos, and potentially, I believe, other conservatories as well, in order to double major like that, you have to audition and get in both instruments. So you have to keep that in mind as well if you're looking at double majoring in certain schools. And that can also affect things like for organ, I know at least in the places where I applied, you were required to take piano at least 1 year, if not two, along with your organ. And often organ departments will also suggest that you get like a harpsichord certificate or diploma of some sort. So there are ways to kind of branch out and test things out, and those can also come in handy, like Michelle said, with jobs, especially if you're working along with that, because then you may be asked to play the piano, you may be asked to do other things, so that can also come in handy there.
Yeah, just to kind of like sum all that up, personally, the way that I see it at least is that kind of like universities that are more like liberal arts focused, like with a music department, kind of like where I went, Loyola, are great for kind of more like breadth, and you can explore more things a little bit more easily. And then full on conservatories are great for like really intense like depth, kind of like Emily was saying in her introduction. And then there's schools that are universities like Indiana, like Michigan, just to name a couple, like Rice, I guess, with like really more like focused, established like music schools rather than just kind of a department within, say, a College of Arts and Sciences. And those I feel like it obviously depends greatly on the school, but that one you can kind of get like the best of both worlds. And yeah, like Emily was saying, it's not to say that you can't pursue multiple instruments at a conservatory if you really want that depth and intensity in multiple instruments. But there's a lot of different options for that kind of path.
Yeah.
Also, you have a long time, longer than you think. I think when I first started, I thought I needed to do everything like all at once, or else I was not going to get all those skills. You have a long time in your life to develop a lot of these different areas. So I think picking what's going to like help you more in that moment, and then also thinking about what you can develop later will also help you choose that.
Yeah. And depending upon where you go, they'll often allow you to extend your program. I personally have decided to actually extend my master's degree by a year due to circumstances with my job and things like that. And that can also, it's a bit of a mind shift. Like Michelle said, I also was thinking like, I got to get done. But really, sometimes that can actually be even more beneficial, and you can go more in depth with that sort of thing as well.
Cool. All right, we got two more questions. Awesome.
Ooh.
This is from our executive director of the AGO, James Foster.
Oh.
Thank you, ladies, for leading this webinar. Were your teachers supportive of the AGO? Whether yes or no, did that matter to you?
Ooh.
That's a good question as well.
Great question, James. I'd say like both my undergrad and my graduate teachers are definitely supportive of the AGO. I mean, they perform in AGO functions fairly regularly. I'd say Professor Morrison was definitely more involved in I can't actually say that. They're both involved on the local level. Professor Cowan was actually serving on our Houston AGO chapter level this year as our educations person. And Professor Morrison has been involved in many different ways with the Philadelphia chapter. And I'd say both of them really kind of they have different perspectives on the AGO, but I think both are certainly very invested in the future of the organ for sure. And that plays out in different ways, but I'd say they're definitely not, strangers.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't, like I was saying, I, got my start a little bit later. I didn't even join the AGO until my junior year of my undergraduate degree. But yeah, I mean, I was encouraged to by my teacher and also by my mentor that was at the church that I was at the time to join. And then when I was in grad school, Bloomington, Indiana actually has its own chapter, which is really pretty much just the organ department of IU as members. But there is that programming. And I mean, even on a broader level, whether it's AGO support specifically, obviously we love the AGO, but also on a broader level, just like what kind of networking opportunities are there? Like, is your teacher going to help you with that? Are there connections to certain jobs? Do they help you with any of that? Or are you like maybe a little bit more on your own? I think that those resources can be really helpful for your professional development, for getting a church job if that's something you're interested in while you're in school. And yeah, so just kind of looking at their broader connection with the organ community wherever the school is, and even really across the region and the country as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my professors, all of them were involved in the AGO in some way, but to different degrees. I think some of them emphasized more of the like certifications and educational part of it. And I think other professors emphasized more the networking aspect. And then I think more recently, more of the performing aspect of it. So I think that while all three of my professors have supported the AGO, it has looked different between each of them. I will say that. And how much support and how involved we should be regarding also like, doing our studies and kind of finding that balance. But I do think, well, I know for myself, honestly, I think the thing that really struck me most about joining the AGO was not actually maybe my professors, but even more so my professors taking me to the local chapters and then meeting those other organists who also like had either like gone to school there or like knew other people at other places. And that helped me feel much more connected to the community that was there. I think that was one of the biggest aspects I appreciated about all of those professors, is connected me to those local people, especially moving across the country like I did with this degree. Everything else I did in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I grew up. For this last one, I moved across the whole country to live in California now. So great question.
Yeah.
We have another question here. When applying to conservatories, how did you complete your resume for applications? What resources did you use? Our school has no resources to help us with the music school options.
Ooh, okay. Great question.
I think the AGO did a webinar on resume building maybe 2 or 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe it was for the year of the Young Organist. So there is a video out there on the AGO YouTube that talks about resume building. So that would be one resource that you could definitely use. I will say, so my last 2 years of high school were completed at Interlochen Arts Academy in Interlochen, Michigan. And this is a private arts high school. So as part of that, we had resources in the form of advisors who could help walk us through some of the application process. So I don't believe I really used many resources when building my resume. I just tried to organize it in a way that was easy to read. And I just sat down and kind of typed out, like, I thought about, okay, what competitions have I won? What kind of performances have I done? Like summer intensives, the things that I thought conservatories and schools would be looking for in terms of like, oh, this person's really invested and interested. And then I kind of ran it past the advisor. I definitely recommend having people read this, get outside opinions. So that way, if like, it's always good. If you sit there long enough and sort of stare at a document, it's going to seem a little weird. So it's nice to send that to someone else, get fresh eyes on it. But I think they're not necessarily looking for a specific format. At least that was not my experience. So really, as long as it's readable and it has information that's really relevant to like, why are you applying for a music degree? How much experience do you have? And what have you done? I think they'll go for it.
Yeah, I mean, writing a music resume is hard in and of itself. Writing one when you're maybe still in high school and maybe have had 1 or 0 jobs, and just you're like, oh, what am I supposed to put here? That's definitely tough. But I mean, I think that if you don't have a ton of things like Emily was saying, like certain like competitions, jobs, stuff like that, I mean, there's plenty of other stuff you can include on a resume, including like skills that you have, whether musical or, kind of tangential things, volunteer experience you might have that's relevant to music. Even honestly, I think for me at least, I would put if you have like an outside part-time or summer job as well, because I think that even conservatories these days look at least I would like to hope, look at admissions in a little more of a holistic manner. But yeah, definitely format and like being concise is big. And if it only ends up being about a half a page or something, maybe play with the format, make it look a little bit longer. But even then, if you're still in high school getting into conservatory admissions, then you're still in high school. They can't expect you to have a multiple page CV by the age of 18.
And they don't, and I believe they have an upper limit of how many pages you actually can submit for a resume anyway. I believe it's like 2 pages or something like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and I'll just add to this because this is all I think right on. The two biggest things that I think having filled out tons of resumes, CVs, letters, getting people to sign stuff, references. I mean, you name it, the list goes on, and it kind of doesn't stop. The more you go in higher ed, you just keep kind of adding to what you have throughout it. My two biggest pieces of advices would be one, it is your time to brag about yourself. So brag about yourself. Don't be afraid to include anything on there. If it is something that you are proud of, put it on there. You want stuff to be able to talk about. I think, for me personally, all of the random volunteer opportunities and other things. I mean, I did a lot of Habitat for Humanity where I built houses. Not a lot to do with organ, but I did learn a lot of skills there that were really helpful to me in developing like how to work with people and how do you approach something that maybe you've never done this before. So there's nothing I think that you should be kind of afraid to put on there if you think it's relevant to who you are and what the image is that you're trying to present to whoever this is. And I think the second thing is it's so easy to buy somebody a cup of coffee and have a conversation. That has saved me so much time and effort. Can you read this for me? Can you tell me about this program? Can you tell me about this process? Can you tell me about the organ here? Can you tell me about your experience? There's lots of questions that we can ask people. So don't be afraid to like reach out to these universities, reach out to these teachers, reach out to the people that you're interested in talking with, reach out to the admissions people. I know in my undergrad, I'm really involved. I'm listed as like an alumni, and if anybody's interested in any of the fields that I went through, the university will connect me with them so I can have conversations with them as they're applying. So some schools also have that as well, but you can also take that on yourself. And I would especially do that like as you're deciding what colleges, I always encourage like making lists. I and I'll admit to you all, like I only applied to one undergrad and one master's. I did way more applying for my doctorate, but that's just because of the circumstances I was in. That's not the norm. So apply to as many places as you can. And also when you email, because it can cost a lot of money to apply to these places. If you apply to a bunch of them and you email them and say, please, 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 I want to be here, but this costs a lot of money and I'm applying to a bunch of different places, they will many times give you discounts and sometimes just straight up waive the fee. So do yourself that favor, like make yourself the list, get those emails, check with those people. That'll also help you in that process.
Yeah, I totally agree with talking to people. That I'd say was one of the most valuable bits of research for me. Like, and getting to know the instruments is, I mean, we play very location based instruments and they are all so, so different. And one of the things that was really, really helpful for me, especially in undergrad when auditioning, was I knew what those instruments were like. Do your research before the auditions. If you can go and play them and get to work with the profs, that's a great thing. Read the stop lists. Think about your registrations of your music before you get there, because you're only given a bit of time to set up. So the more you have already planned out in advance, I draft lists of all of my registrations and I come in with big sheets of paper and I sit down and I register them and then I try to see how it sounds and adjust by ear. So it's one of those, it saves you so much time. I could get what would take an hour and a half done in 30 minutes or less doing that. And that is also really crucial. So get to know people, get to know instruments, and that will give you a much better sense than just looking on the website. Looking on the website is the first step. Getting to know what you're looking at and seeing whether or not it's a good fit for you is really the crucial thing.
Well, all right. Another question here. I saw the conference description mention something about community college. Can you study organ at any community college, or just be certain ones where they have a program? Which is a really good question.
Yeah.
So when I went to community college, they did not have any organ through the one that was associated with the school. But here, and there are some that do have organs, but you wouldn't be taking lessons through the community college. Usually what happens is it's an organist who's teaching at the community college who can either give you lessons aside from school or can connect you with somebody who is giving lessons. Where I find community college especially helpful is two areas. Number one, when you're in high school, there's a lot of more opportunities now for dual enrollment, especially when you're a junior and senior, where you can take classes. And a lot of schools will accept these credits as like a transfer. And this will be a lot of the basic things that you have to do when you first enter a school. Like I know for myself, I was going to a liberal arts school, so they have a lot of basic requirements about like, taking something for science and taking something for, because it was a religious school, I had to take like a religion class. And I would say though, at all levels, there are always some sort of like basic core classes. And especially if your community college has a music program, you can take a lot of those and get ahead. The theory classes, the oral skills classes, maybe you are an organist and piano is like not your big thing. There's some basic piano classes that you could also take, and some teachers there. So I use that as a great resource. One, definitely when you're in high school to dual enroll. But what I actually did for me is when I was doing my undergrad, I would spend my summers taking organ lessons through my teacher. We had a summer program that you could pay for lessons. Actually, my teacher with AGO funds, that's how I got those lessons covered over the summers. And then I took these community college classes, some online, some in person, but I would just get them out of the way in the summer, do all of that work. So then that way I knew when I came in for the year, I could really focus on the stuff that like I really wanted to focus on. Not that those other skills weren't also important, but I know for myself personally, like when I want to be involved in music, I want to be involved in music. So I wanted to do every ensemble. And if I was taking all these classes, I also couldn't do all the ensembles. So that was like a negotiation thing on my own process. But the thing I will share, which may affect your decision, is that when I took those classes at community college, it was $111 a credit, which is the cheapest I have ever paid for any college credit at all. And to give you just kind of like that price difference for one credit for my doctorate degree at USC was $2,500. So we're talking like a huge price difference here. And I don't think that should be discounted, especially because a lot of the people that teach at community colleges are the same people teaching at the main universities, or have retired from the universities or just starting their careers. So you're getting a lot of the same really good information. So that would be my advice about community colleges.
Yeah, I don't have any firsthand experience with community college, but I do have a friend who did 2 years at a community college before transferring to a university and getting her, bachelor's in music and organ. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that this path, obviously great to, save money and stuff. I think that it would be a little bit less applicable if you're like 100% wanting to go into a conservatory, just because full-on conservatories, like Emily was saying at one point, don't have as many general education requirements. But if you're wanting to go into a university, it can be great to get even like an associate's degree in music. You can knock out a lot of the general music classes, and save a lot of money. To specifically answer this question, I don't know any community colleges off the top of my head that have like specific organ programs. Maybe there are some out there. But I think that a better kind of situation would be like maybe you're staying where you already live, maybe living at home with your parents, and taking organ lessons with whoever you already were taking lessons with. That would be outside of the school curriculum, of course, but while doing the quote unquote like academic classes at the community college, and then later figuring out where you might want to transfer to finish up your 4-year degree. And then my friend ended up at IU getting a master's and a performer diploma. So there's like really a lot of paths that you can go, and you can really get to the same place with enough, hard work and dedication.
Yeah. I think it's important to note, given how our conversations have gone, that really there is no right answer to the way that you go through your degrees. It's really just finding the path that's right for you and finding the school that's right for you. It's not necessarily the name of the school or like the location or any specific thing. It's finding the fit that works the best for what you want to do, because I know when I went to a couple of college fairs, there were so many of the admissions people who were like, you've got to think about more than just like, ooh, shiny. And when you look at schools, it's one of those, you have to really think about, is this a good fit? Or or is it just something that I think would be a good fit? And finding that difference, I think, is really, really important as well.
And I want to throw out there too. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I mean, ultimately, I think you're going to thrive more in the environment that's right for you, and not like the environment that like people expect you to be in, or like maybe like you've always revered this one school, and then you end up auditioning there and being like, oh, I don't think I would really be happy here. Kind of like in Gilmore Girls, Rory always wanted to go to Harvard, and then she ended up really falling in love with Yale, and that ended up being the right place for her. So you're going to thrive wherever is really best for you, and only you can kind of figure out where that is.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say. And I was going to say there's no shame in something not working out and being like, I think I want to transfer. I have met some really killer transfer students who knew exactly what they wanted and just needed to find the place to do it. But sometimes you just need to get your foot in the door and try and experience something, and that's not a negative thing. Also, I want to share too that you don't, just because you go in with a major doesn't necessarily always mean that that's what's going to kind of work out. And I will go ahead and put myself on blast here and say that in my doctorate degree, I actually started with organ performance and then did 3 years of that before I decided to switch and finally graduate with sacred music. And I don't regret that at all. I loved all of my time in the organ performance area, but for myself, with where my jobs were going and the amount of ensembles that I was like conducting and playing with, and I was gigging, and I've played with ballets and you name it, I've probably played an organ at some odd place. And for me, that was like the light bulb moment of like, no, I think sacred music is the thing that I'm really attracted to here. And I had really, really great supportive professors that like made that happen for me. And I graduated with it. So I think that, sometimes if you do try something and it's not quite working out, don't get freaked out by it and think like this is gonna be like this is it. I think we all go through those in many different ways. Sometimes it takes on the shape of like multiple degrees. Sometimes it takes transferring. Sometimes it's actually I want to go study over in Europe for a while. All of those things are very, very valid. It's just you got to think about what's going to help you the best, and it's going to look different for everybody, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, we got another question here. How did you know that the organ was the right path for you? Many people I've talked to have simply known that it was the right path, but I'm not so sure.
Ooh, that's a great question.
That's a good question.
I unfortunately just kind of knew there was just like, I don't know, I guess I had a spiritual experience. But it does take some effort to discern. And if you're not sure, like I said, go to a place that offers you a little bit more flexibility, and sometimes you just have to explore and figure things out before you're gonna know.
I will say I went into school not thinking I would be an organist. In fact, I was pretty adamant when I first started my undergrad that I was going to never teach children, that this honestly, this is what I thought. I was never going to teach children. I wasn't going to do any type of performance. I wanted to do music therapy, and that's what I was going to do. And then, like, maybe have a church job that I just kind of played at. I did not feel this calling to the organ as like, this is the thing for me. Um, it was taking the secondary lessons and being encouraged by my teachers and then getting gigs and making connections, and it was like this evolution of kind of support that I didn't expect would be there, that kind of shifted my opinion on it all, because then and I think this is true for a lot of young organists. I think especially like young female and non-binary person organists. It can be really hard to see yourself in the organ world sometimes, especially when a lot of people don't look like you. And so I know for myself, I had to do a lot of like community building and figuring out, where am I going with this? How are my colleagues supporting me? How can I support and sustain myself in this? And it wasn't until probably my senior year of my undergrad that I really thought, no, you know what? I think I am really going to do this organ thing. Like I think I've been, playing it, but this is like, I really find an interest in it. I feel like I'm growing in it. I feel like there's more for me to learn. And that's what one got me my job, because I wasn't just a music therapist for the music director position that I had. I was also an organist, which they were looking for both in that job. And then, that is what helped me. Also, when I went on to get this other degree in sacred music, I still am a music therapist. That's what got me working. I'm working in community work right now. So you don't have to be just an organist, and I don't think that there's ever a point that like you just have to like know this is for you. Some people do, some people don't. I think both are okay.
Yeah. I'd say for me, there have been moments that kind of confirmed that this was the right thing. I think much like you were saying, Michelle, it was really kind of a big community that just sort of built itself in some ways. I mean, when I started playing the organ, it was because my piano teacher had said, "Hey, you want to try this?" and happened to have a digital organ in her home. And I thought it was really cool. I'd always wondered what, the pedals felt like to play. So I immediately took to it and thought it was great. But through getting connected first with the AGO, through pipe organ encounters, and then to different schools and institutions and people through the various camps that I did, I started realizing like, hey, I feel like I'm good at this. And also, hey, these people really are invested in what I'm doing. And to build those connections, I think was sort of a confirmation of that. And as things went, I mean, there are moments, I mean, like, I'd say conservatories and schools in general, but certainly conservatories are very intense. There will be moments where, and I went in knowing like, this is what I want to do. And I went in and I was still thinking, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? Like, why am I doing this? Why did I decide to, do this to myself? And I think if you can come out of that and still feel centered and know like, I have this music and this is me and this is what I'm supposed to do, that again is sort of another moment of knowing. I'd say you never stop kind of realizing that you know what you're supposed to do.
And I think also, I know for myself, especially like trying to find your identity amidst all of this stuff, it took me a long time. And I wish somebody would have said it to me at the very beginning, that throughout it all, you're always a musician, no matter what you do, no matter what level you engage in the organ, whether it's just like, I'm just going to kind of do like a part-time thing here. I just, I play my prelude postlude and that's it. That's all I want to do. That is just as valid as going on and performing a huge concert. You're still a musician. You're still engaging with this material. You're still engaging with other people. You're still putting that music out there in some format. Even if it's just for you, that's still fine. And also, I think that we don't want to discount also all of the areas, especially in like the music technology field with organ, and organ builders that we like very desperately need. And I mean, oh my gosh, I don't want to just point out Anna Lapwood all the time, but I do because of like her huge TikTok following, which is a whole skill in itself. There's lots of things that can help you develop into what you want to become. I think an organist is just maybe like a part of that identity. And it can look a different, like I keep saying, it looks differently over time. There's been times that I felt like I really want to engage, you know, with this instrument. There's times that I've gone back to piano or like picked up guitar again, or like, you know, learn some like ukulele, or like, you know, it depends where you're at in life, and also like kind of where you get jobs. That also kind of will speak throughout, I think, your time. But there's lots of opportunities. And the other thing I do want to mention too is, just because you go, say you do go to the conservatory, or you do go to liberal arts school, or you do decide to do like higher ed with like graduate degrees or whatever, there's also a ton of other learning opportunities for you as well. Some are through the AGO. I mean, there are the certifications, there are the webinars, there's different ways you can engage in that aspect. There's also, I never want anybody to discount, like I've said about like traveling abroad, doing master classes, studying with other teachers, making connections. That is all also very valid in your education process. I think a lot of times we want to think of like education as just like a class format or like a lesson format, but there's a lot of different ways to learn. So all of those, so if you do go to school and you do feel like you're missing, like, oh, I wish I would have da, 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 or like, I wish that I've gone and studied with this person. Well, maybe you could do like a summer thing, or like over, you know, I know like they have like May term stuff, or over winter break, or there's lots of different ways these things could look. I know some people who have even, especially it's really common in doctorate programs to like take like a little sabbatical, do some other stuff, and then like finish. I know a lot of colleagues who have done that, and then they used all those skills that they learned during that sabbatical to help them finish their degree, because sometimes you just run out of things to say and energy and kind of need something new to revitalize you. So I just want to throw all those options out there as well, just so that, you know, you all know that it's not just like, nothing looks just like one way in this career.
And to add to that, I'd also say that, you know, never underestimate the power of going and setting something up yourself. Because often, like Michelle said, if you're thinking about, oh, I want to study with so-and-so, or, oh, I have this particular piece of music and I know someone who really specializes in this. If you know them, and even if you don't, contact them and talk to them and say, hey, I really admire what you do with XYZ. Would you be willing to help? Because there are a lot of people out there who are more than willing to at least engage with you and maybe come to some sort of conclusion. And that can often lead to other possibilities as well. And then you'll end up with more ways to engage, I'd say, in that way. But I mean, don't just think that just because you're in one location that you're stuck in that one location, especially with Zoom now.
Especially with Zoom. Yeah, I think that's really changed things a lot. I've met so many more organists than ever before with Zoom, which has been so cool.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Do you think we should talk about like the audition process and application process at all? Or have we kind of touched on?
We could talk, why don't we finish up by just talking a little bit about that audition process?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously, as a disclaimer, it can differ very greatly depending on the type of school and the individual school.
Oh yeah. And certainly within the day as well. I mean, at Kardos, our organ died literally the day I was supposed to have an audition. And you've got to, that's kind of one of those things, you have to be prepared for anything in the audition process too. You know, a stop may not be working, or things may not be going the way you kind of would hope they would go in an ideal environment. But you can also then, that's an opportunity to also show the professors like, hey, look, I can deal with this, you know. And it's also an opportunity in many ways, I'd say, for that as well.
And we do have an audition guide that you can check out too, which is real cool. And the other thing I'll add about auditioning is, especially this is something I really took into consideration, especially with my doctorate when I was really applying to a lot of different places. Looking up all those audition requirements and making a list of everything and deciding what repertoire you're gonna learn for it in advance will save your life. Because not, I mean, it could vary so much. I had places that were like, we want you to play multiple Bach works. And actually one of them I think was like, you just had to do something in that range, but it didn't have to be Bach. It could be something similar. Other ones wanted to see more contemporary stuff. Others wanted to see like him playing. And that could be like, depending on what you're doing, that could be a lot of repertoire to learn, which I think can also help inform your decision. Because if you're like, wow, I have to learn all new things for this audition over here, but the other 5 places I'm auditioning, I only have to like vary one piece, you're probably more likely to say like, I don't really know that I want to audition over at this place. So that's why I definitely recommend making that list, determining like, what are you going to learn, what are you going to work on, bringing it to your teachers before that, or even let's say you're out of school for like a minute here, go to a different teacher, email a different teacher, ask them to like listen to you, tell them that like, can I just pay for like one lesson with you for you to listen to, or can I send you videos and I'll pay you, whatever amount. All of those are very valid options.
And taking into consideration the limitations of the organs you may have as well is also very important when it comes to thinking about what repertoire you're going to choose for auditions. Because there are some schools where you're auditioning on a practice organ and it's very simple and they do it that way deliberately. So that way they can really get a sense of your technique and things. And then there's some where you're auditioning on a 5-manual organ. And if you are thinking about different repertoire, some of them are going to require 3 manuals. And if you're auditioning on an instrument that only has 2, you're going to be stuck. So when thinking about those sorts of things, you also need to take that into consideration when it comes to what repertoire you ultimately end up choosing. Yeah.
I think that's and as always, I think all of our emails are on the website. But feel free, especially to contact Emily as being our counselor. At any point, I think that I don't know, I don't want to speak for us all, but I think really at any point, anybody wanted to reach out to anybody in the Goyo committee, we would all be more than happy to answer any of these questions. Or if you just needed like a starting point, I think between all of us, we've been at a lot of the different schools like around the country, or at least know somebody that's been to one of them. Which can also help, just kind of point out some key people sometimes. And then the AGO also has a really great part of their website that lists all of these different schools that have all these different programs from bachelor's to master's to doctorate. What I know for myself, because my partner was also getting a degree, we had to find a place in the United States that offered commercial music and organ, which is a very niche part of this country. So I really utilize those lists a lot in determining like, where are we going to go to do this? How is this going to happen? Obviously, I ended up in Los Angeles, but there were many other places on my list when I was auditioning. So don't, use as many resources as are out there. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah. And feel free to reach out. I mean, definitely. The email for Goyo is agoyo@agohq.org. But like Michelle said, all of our emails are on the website. So have any further questions, don't hesitate.
And thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for asking questions. I made this so much more interesting. So thank you all.
It was really great. Thank you all.